They called it performance realignment. I called it nonsense, especially since I was the one who built the system they now claimed I didn't fully understand. You don't fire the architect for walking through her own building, but they did. And while they thought I'd disappear quietly with my box of desk plants, they forgot one thing: nothing in that $60 million engine moved without the code I wrote, including its kill switch. My name is Emily Warren, and I used to believe that competence spoke for itself. 34 years old, 10 years in software engineering, and naive enough to think that building a $60 million system from scratch would secure my position at Horizon Vine Technologies. I should have known better when they started tracking bathroom breaks. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my corner cube, pushing my latest commit at 4:58 p.m. on a Thursday. Around me, the office theater was in full swing, developers hunched over keyboards, frantically typing nothing important, managers strutting between desks like peacocks surveying their domain. The new metrics dashboard glowed on every screen, tracking productivity in real time. Green meant you were coding, yellow meant you were thinking, red meant you were stealing company time. I was consistently red after 5 p.m. because unlike my colleagues who discovered the art of writing verbose comments and refactoring the same functions endlessly, I actually finished my work. "Warren, you heading out already?" Brad from DevOps called out, his voice carrying that perfect blend of fake concern and real judgment. He'd been here since 7 a.m., accomplishing what I could do in 2 hours, but his dashboard glowed a satisfying green. "Sprint's done," I replied, not looking up as I grabbed my laptop bag. "Pushed the authentication module 2 days early." "Must be nice," he muttered, loud enough for the others to hear. The office symphony of keyboards never missed a beat, but I felt the eyes. They always watched when someone left early. The government contract had changed everything at Horizon Vine. What started as a scrappy startup building cloud infrastructure had morphed into something unrecognizable when the Bureau of Digital Security dangled a 9-figure carrot. Suddenly, we weren't just developers, we were federal contractors with obligations to taxpayers. The culture shift was swift and merciless. I'd architected the entire core system, every microservice, every API endpoint, every security protocol bore my fingerprints, while others played politics and posted inspirational quotes on Slack. I built the thing that would supposedly revolutionize how federal agencies handled secure data exchange. The irony was that I'd made it too efficient. My modules ran so smoothly that I didn't need 60-hour weeks to maintain them. That efficiency became my scarlet letter. The first warning came disguised as a sync-up with Rebecca, our HR director. She'd smiled that practice smile, the one that never reached her eyes, and asked about my work-life integration. "I notice you're very punctual," she'd said, making it sound like an accusation. "Always here at 9, always leaving by 5:30. "Is there a problem with my output?" I'd asked. "Oh no, your technical contributions are adequate." That pause before adequate hung in the air like a threat. "But we're concerned about optics, team cohesion, culture fit." Culture fit, the corporate equivalent of saying you don't belong without legal liability. I'd started noticing things after that meeting. My commits were suddenly requiring additional reviews. My architecture decisions were questioned by people who couldn't explain what an API was 6 months ago. Most telling of all, I wasn't included in the meetings about the very system I'd built. The new VP of Engineering had arrived a month ago. Darren Cole came from one of those companies that confused activity with achievement. His first all-hands featured a 40-slide presentation about maximizing human capital and synergistic productivity. He'd looked directly at me when he mentioned players who weren't pulling their weight. I'd built their $60 million baby while he was still updating his LinkedIn with buzzwords. But sure, I wasn't pulling my weight. The Thursday I left at 4:58 p.m. would be my last normal day at Horizon Vine. I didn't know it yet, but Darren had already scheduled the Friday morning meeting that would end my time there. He'd already drafted the termination paperwork, already calculated that they could save my salary while my system ran itself. What he hadn't calculated was that I'd never transferred certain critical licenses to the company. Why would I? They were tools I developed on my own time, brought to the project because I believed in what we were building. The employment contract had a 90-day clause about personal IP, plenty of time to negotiate fair compensation for my pre-existing work. They'd never asked, I'd never offered, and in 36 hours, that oversight would cost them everything. But that Thursday evening, I just drove home, made dinner, and spent exactly 0 minutes thinking about Horizon Vine Technologies. I'd logged my 40 hours. I'd delivered my code. If only they'd valued the work more than the performance of working. The email arrived at 8:43 a.m. Friday morning. Urgent mandatory meeting. Conference room A. No agenda, no context. Just Darren Cole's name at the bottom and Rebecca from HR CC'd. I knew before I even stood up from my desk. Conference room A was the execution chamber, the glass-walled space where careers went to die. Through those transparent walls, the entire office could watch your professional demise while pretending to focus on their screens. Corporate transparency at its finest. Darren sat at the head of the table, wearing his usual uniform blue shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up to show he was a hands-on leader. Rebecca flanked him with a manila folder that might as well have had termination stamped across it in red. They'd even brought Keith from IT, lurking in the corner with his laptop, ready to revoke my access the moment I was officially dead. "Emily, thanks for joining us," Darren began, as if I'd had a choice. "I'll cut right to the chase. We're making some organizational changes." I sat down slowly, maintaining eye contact. Organizational changes. Your role is being eliminated. He delivered it like he was telling me the coffee machine was broken. Effective immediately. My role, I kept my voice steady. You mean the lead architect position for the system we're delivering to the Bureau next month? Rebecca jumped in, her HR training kicking in. This isn't about your technical capabilities, Emily. It's about cultural alignment and team dynamics. I see. I leaned back, letting them fill the silence. Amateurs always fill the silence. Darren took the bait. Your commitment to work-life balance is admirable, but this team needs people who go above and beyond, who show initiative beyond the bare minimum. The bare minimum being the 40 hours I'm contractually obligated to work. See, that attitude right there? He pointed at me like he'd caught me in something. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone else is putting in 60, 70 hours a week. They're showing dedication. You clock out at 5 like this is some government job. The irony of that statement, given our government contract, seemed lost on him. Brad from DevOps logged 82 hours last week, he continued. Sarah pulled 2 all-nighters to meet her sprint goals. That's the kind of commitment we need. I wanted to mention that Brad's 82 hours produced 3 barely functional features, while my 40 hours delivered the entire authentication framework. I wanted to point out that Sarah's all-nighters were fixing bugs in code she'd rushed through during previous all-nighters. But I didn't. I just nodded. When do you need me out? I asked instead. Rebecca slid the folder across the table. We're prepared to offer 2 weeks severance in exchange for signing this separation agreement. You'll have until noon to collect your personal items. I flipped through the pages, scanning for the important parts. Non-disparagement clause, check. Non-compete, that definitely wouldn't hold up in court, check. And buried on page 4, the beautiful oversight that would soon destroy them, no mention of the proprietary tools and licenses I'd integrated into their precious system. I'll need to document my current projects, I said. Hand over passwords. Make sure the team can maintain what I've built. Darren waved his hand dismissively. Keith has already revoked your access. We've got it covered. Your documentation is adequate. There it was again. Adequate. My documentation that included every function, every dependency, every integration point, every single detail except the ones that mattered, the ones about my personal encryption libraries and authentication tools that were still licensed under my name, not Horizon Vine's. If you're sure, I said, signing the agreement with a steady hand. We appreciate your professionalism, Rebecca chirped. already mentally checking off this termination from her Friday to-do list. Keith finally spoke up from his corner. "I'll need your laptop, badge, and any company equipment." I slid my laptop across the table, placed my badge on top. The development environment on that machine has some custom configurations. You might want to— "We've got it covered," Darren interrupted. "We're not exactly amateurs here." "No," I thought, watching Keith carelessly shove my laptop into a bag. "You're not amateurs." Amateurs would have asked questions. Amateurs would have wondered why their lead architect wasn't fighting harder. Amateurs might have noticed the slight smile I was fighting to suppress. "One question," I said as I stood to leave. "Who's taking over the architecture, just so I know who to refer people to if they contact me?" Darren puffed up. "I'll be personally overseeing the technical direction. My experience with large-scale systems will be invaluable." His experience? The man who once asked me why we couldn't just download more RAM was going to oversee my system. My $60 million baby was being handed to someone who thought GitHub was a type of social media. "Best of luck," I said, meaning every word. They would need it. As I walked back to my former desk, to collect my things, I felt the eyes of the entire office on me. Some sympathetic, most just grateful it wasn't them. The typing had stopped. The performance paused for authentic drama. I packed my personal items slowly, methodically. A coffee mug, a small plant, a photo from the launch party when we'd first won the government contract. I left the awards, the certificates of appreciation, the team photos. Let them remember what they'd thrown away. By 11:30 a.m., I was walking out of Horizon Vine Technologies for the last time, cardboard box in hand like a corporate cliché. Behind me, Darren was probably already announcing my departure, spinning it as an opportunity for the team to step up, to show their dedication, to work even harder for even less recognition. They had no idea what they'd just done, no idea that in precisely 90 days, my personal licenses would expire and their $60 million system would start eating itself alive. But I knew, and for the first time in months, I left the office with a genuine smile. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I didn't even update my LinkedIn status to "open to work." Instead, I drove home in complete silence, placed the cardboard box on my kitchen counter, and made myself a cup of coffee. The same Brazilian blend I'd been drinking at exactly 10:15 a.m. for the past 3 years, except now I could enjoy it without pretending to care about sprint velocities. The rage would come later. First, I had work to do. My personal laptop sat where I'd left it that morning, closed and unassuming. I opened it and began my real job, the one Darren Cole couldn't even comprehend existed. See, when you build a system from scratch, you know every hidden corner, every shortcut, every decision made at 2 a.m. when the deadline was breathing down your neck. You know which parts are held together with digital duct tape and prayers. More importantly, you know which parts are yours. I pulled up my development environment and started documenting. Not for them, they'd made it clear they didn't need my help. This was for me. Every custom library, every proprietary tool, every piece of code I'd written on weekends and integrated because I'd believed in the project. The encryption module that handled secure key exchanges mine, developed 2 years before I'd ever heard of Horizon Vine. The authentication framework that made their zero-trust architecture possible, built on my personal time, refined through my own side projects. The contract was clear: 90 days to transfer personal IP or negotiate licensing, standard stuff that most companies handle in the first week of development. But Darren had been too busy measuring hours to notice the foundation of his $60 million system was technically on loan. By evening, I'd compiled everything: 14 core modules, 37 utilities, and one particularly elegant piece of middleware that handled failover between services. Without it, the system would work until it didn't. One service hiccup, one unexpected load spike, and the whole thing would cascade like dominoes. That night, I incorporated Latitude Systems LLC. The name came to me while staring at my GPS coordinates on Google Maps. Latitude, the freedom to move north or south, the freedom to choose your direction. It cost me $300 and took 15 minutes online. By midnight, I was officially a consulting firm. I spent the weekend doing what unemployed engineers do. I monitored my old system, not through any nefarious means. The status pages were public, the performance metrics published for transparency. I watched response times, error rates, uptime percentages. Everything hummed along perfectly, my code doing exactly what I'd designed it to do. They'd probably celebrated after I left. Darren had likely given some speech about trimming the fat and increasing efficiency. The team would nod along, secretly updating their resumes, but publicly praising his leadership. The show must go on. On Monday, I received 12 LinkedIn messages from recruiters and one text from Sarah. "Can't believe they did that to you. Darren says he's promoting Brad to lead architect. Brad, the guy who thought MongoDB was a type of database migration tool. We're so screwed." I didn't respond. Sarah meant well, but she was still there, still playing the game, still pulling her all-nighters to impress people who counted hours instead of outcomes. Instead, I focused on building Latitude Systems' website. Clean, professional, understated. No buzzwords, no stock photos of people pointing at whiteboards. Just a simple message. Specialized consulting for critical system architecture and licensing compliance. The rage finally hit on Tuesday night. I'd been reviewing my notes when I found a comment I'd written in the code 6 months earlier. To-do, renegotiate personal licensing before production deployment. Don't let them forget this time. This time, because I'd been through this before, at a smaller company, and had promised myself I'd never let my work be taken for granted again, yet here I was. Fired for refusing to pretend that presence equaled productivity, watching someone else take credit for systems they couldn't even understand. I opened my laptop and checked the system status again. Still perfect, still running on code that would stop being legally licensed in 87 days. I could have sent an email, could have warned them, could have been the bigger person. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and started drafting a very different kind of document. A comprehensive audit of every line of code in their system that relied on my personal IP. Not for them, they'd figure it out eventually. This was for whoever would inevitably come looking for answers when everything went sideways. Because it would, not through any action on my part, but through their own arrogance and oversight. They'd built a $60 million house on a foundation they didn't own, and the lease was almost up. I raised my glass to my empty home office. To adequate documentation, I said to no one, and to the 90-day clause they forgot to read. Outside, the city hummed with the usual Tuesday night energy. Somewhere across town, my former colleagues were probably still at their desks, logging hours to impress a man who measured dedication by exhaustion. Brad was likely Googling system architecture for dummies and hoping nobody noticed. Let them scramble. Let them perform their productivity theater. I had 87 days to wait and a consulting firm to build. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely. It was anticipation, the calm before a storm that Horizon Vine Technologies had created themselves, one 40-hour week at a time. The first cracks appeared on a Wednesday. 72 days after my unceremonious exit, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, reviewing a potential client's architecture proposal, when my phone buzzed with a Google alert. Horizon Vine Technologies, and system failure in the same headline. My coffee suddenly tasted much better. The tech blogs were having a field day. Government contractor experiences major outage during critical demo. Federal Bureau questions Horizon Vine's capability. After system collapse, $60 million contract in jeopardy as technical issues mount. I pulled up the public status page I'd been casually monitoring. Error rates had spiked to 37%. Response times were measuring in minutes, not milliseconds. The beautiful green dashboard I'd once maintained now looked like a Christmas tree on fire, red alerts everywhere. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another, and another. The fourth time, I recognized the number. Sarah, calling from her personal cell. "Emily, thank God," she gasped when I finally answered. "Everything's falling apart. The authentication service is rejecting valid tokens. The load balancer is routing traffic to dead nodes. And Brad just told Darren we need to turn it off and on again. I took a sip of coffee. Sounds like you have a problem. Emily, please, I know they screwed you over, but the bureau is here. Like, actually here in the office. They're talking about pulling the entire contract. Have you tried turning it off and on again? I asked innocently. This isn't funny. Darren's in full panic mode. He's been screaming at everyone for 2 hours. He even called that consulting firm he used to work with. But they took one look at the codebase and said it would take them 3 months just to understand it. 3 months? I'd built it in 6. But understanding someone else's architecture always took longer than creating your own, especially when that architecture was properly complex, necessarily intricate, and thoroughly documented in a way that was technically complete, but practically useless without context. Why are you calling me? Sarah. Because you're the only one who actually understands this system. Emily, I'm begging you. Just tell me what's wrong, off the record, as a friend. A friend. The same friend who'd stayed silent when they marched me out. Who'd complained about the company but never stood up when it mattered. Check the license expiration dates on the third-party services, I said finally, not lying, just pointing her toward one of many problems they were about to discover. License expiration, but we have enterprise agreements. Not for everything. The line went quiet. I could practically hear her mind working, probably remembering all those times I'd mentioned personal tools and custom libraries, all those casual comments about my code that everyone had dismissed as developer ego. Oh God, she whispered. Emily, are you saying? I'm saying check the licenses. Gotta go. Sarah, good luck. I hung up and went back to my laptop. Within minutes, my LinkedIn showed 3 new profile views from Horizon Vine employees, then 5, then 12. The panic was spreading. By Thursday morning, the situation had escalated beautifully. Tech reporters were calling it the Horizon Vine meltdown. Someone had leaked internal Slack messages showing Darren demanding 100-hour weeks from the team to fix the issues. Screenshots circulated of Brad's code reviews, with comments like, "Not sure what this does, but it looks complicated, so LGTM." The Bureau of Digital Security released a terse statement. We are reviewing our partnership with Horizon Vine Technologies and exploring alternative vendors to ensure the security and reliability of our critical infrastructure. Translation: Horizon Vine was about to lose the contract that comprised 70% of their value. My phone had collected 43 missed calls by noon. Darren's number appeared 17 times. Rebecca from HR had tried twice. Even Keith from IT had attempted contact, probably wondering if maybe he should have asked about those custom configurations after all. I ignored them all and focused on my new client, a startup that actually understood the value of work-life balance. They'd found me through my website, impressed by my portfolio of efficient, maintainable systems built on sustainable practices. The real entertainment came via my former colleagues' social media. LinkedIn was full of carefully worded posts about exciting new opportunities and being ready for the next adventure. The rats were abandoning ship, and the ship was taking on water fast. Friday brought the crescendo. Darren had apparently offered the entire development team triple overtime to work through the weekend, the same team he'd driven to exhaustion for months. Now being asked to save a system they didn't understand from problems they couldn't identify. Sarah texted me a photo from the office. Pizza boxes stacked to the ceiling, energy drinks scattered like casualties, and in the middle of it all, Darren at a whiteboard trying to diagram my architecture from memory. The diagram looked like a toddler's interpretation of a subway map. He's offering $50,000 to anyone who can fix the authentication module. Her text read, $50,000, less than what they'd saved by firing me, and nowhere near enough to compensate for the 90 days of warnings they'd ignored. I screenshotted the text and filed it away. Not for any legal purpose. I had no intention of suing. This was so much better than any courtroom drama. This was natural consequences playing out in real time, a beautiful symphony of cause and effect. The system status page now showed 93% error rate. In 18 days, when the last of my licenses expired, it would hit 100. But they didn't have 18 days. The Bureau would pull the plug long before then, taking with them Horizon Vine's reputation, revenue, and any hope of future government contracts. All because they'd measured my worth in hours instead of output. All because Darren Cole thought leadership meant surveillance and productivity meant presence. I closed my laptop and decided to take the weekend off. 40 hours was enough for anyone. After all, the email that changed everything arrived on Monday at 9:27 a.m. Not from Horizon Vine, they were still drowning in their self-made disaster. This one came from Michael Reeves, Chief Technology Officer at the Bureau of Digital Security. Ms. Warren, I attended your presentation at DEF CON 3 years ago on Zero Trust Architecture. Impressive work, given recent events with our current vendor. We're seeking an independent security audit of their systems. Your name came up. Interested? M. Reeves. I read it twice. Michael Reeves, the man who'd asked the smartest questions during my presentation, who'd understood the nuances of distributed authentication when everyone else was still debating passwords versus biometrics. He'd remembered me. I crafted my response carefully. Professional interest, competitive rates, immediate availability, no mention of my history with Horizon Vine. He probably knew people like Michael did their homework, but acknowledging it would be crass. His reply came within minutes. Excellent. Can you start tomorrow? Fair warning, it's a mess. Initial contract $80K for 2 weeks of assessment. Standard federal consulting rates apply. $80,000 to professionally document just how badly my former employer had screwed up. The universe had a sense of humor after all. I spent Monday afternoon preparing, reviewing federal compliance requirements, updating my security certifications, and most importantly, practicing my poker face in the mirror. I would need to walk into Horizon Vine's destruction and act surprised. Tuesday morning found me in the Bureau's downtown offices, all glass and steel and the quiet hum of serious business. Michael met me in the lobby tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of handshake that meant business. Emily, thanks for coming on short notice. Coffee. We sat in his office overlooking the city while he laid out the situation. Horizon Vine's system had been failing for 5 days. They'd brought in 3 different consulting firms, each of which had taken one look and declined the job. The Bureau was 48 hours from killing the contract entirely. We need to know if this is salvageable, he said, or if we need to start over with a new vendor. I need an honest assessment, not corporate spin. Understood. I'll need full access to the codebase, architecture documents, and deployment configurations. Done. He slid a laptop across the desk. This has everything. Fair warning, their documentation is adequate, I suggested. He smiled. That's generous. Their former lead architect apparently left recently. Since then, it's been chaos. I'll see what I can do. The laptop contained a horror show. Not my code that was still pristine where it existed, but the patches, the fixes, the desperate attempts to work around systems they didn't understand. Brad had apparently tried to replace my authentication module with something he'd found on Stack Overflow. It was like watching someone try to replace a heart with a bicycle pump. I opened my assessment document and began typing. Objective, professional, devastating. Critical finding number 1 core authentication service relies on unlicensed proprietary libraries. License expired 77 days ago. System operating in violation of terms. Critical finding No. 2. Load balancing algorithm has been modified. Breaking failover protocols. Original implementation appears to have been replaced with non-functional code. Critical finding of 3 security certificates are hard-coded with developer credentials. These credentials appear to belong to a former employee. I worked methodically, documenting each failure with clinical precision. By lunch, I'd identified 23 critical issues, each one traceable to either my unlicensed code or their incompetent attempts to fix it. Michael checked in around 2 p.m. How bad is it? How attached are you to this vendor? Not at all. They were the lowest bidder who could demonstrate a working prototype. The prototype was solid, I said carefully. The production system has fundamental issues that would require significant rework. You're looking at minimum 3 months, assuming you could find developers who understand the architecture. And if we can't, start over. New vendor, new system. It would be faster. He nodded slowly. I suspected as much. Can you document everything by end of week? I can have a preliminary report by Thursday. Perfect. Oh, and Emily, he paused at the door. If we do start over, would Latitude Systems be interested in bidding? There it was, the opportunity I'd been building toward without even knowing it. We'd be happy to discuss it, I said, maintaining professional calm while my heart raced. That evening, I worked from my home office, crafting the report that would bury Horizon Vine. Each finding was supported by evidence, each conclusion backed by data. It was a masterpiece of technical writing, objective, thorough, and absolutely damning. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time I answered. Emily. It's Michael Reeves. Sorry to call after hours, but I just got off a conference call with Horizon Vine's leadership. They claim their issues are due to sabotage by a disgruntled former employee. They specifically mentioned you. My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. I see. That's a serious accusation. It is. They claim you retained access and are somehow causing these failures remotely. Of course, our security logs show no external intrusions, and my team finds their claims unconvincing. But I need to ask, is there any validity to their accusations? Michael, I haven't accessed Horizon Vine's systems since my employment ended. What you're seeing is a failure to manage software licenses and intellectual property transfers. I'd be happy to provide documentation showing the timeline of my separation and the 90-day transfer clause they failed to execute. That would be helpful. For the record, I think they're grasping at straws, but I need everything documented. You'll have it by morning. I hung up and immediately began compiling evidence. Employment contracts, Git commit histories showing all my contributions predated my employment, the clear paper trail of proprietary tools I'd brought to the project. Let them try to blame me for their incompetence. I had receipts. By midnight, I'd sent Michael a comprehensive package proving my innocence and Horizon Vine's negligence. The truth was far more damaging than any sabotage could have been. They'd simply failed to understand what they'd built their empire on. Wednesday would bring Horizon Vine's final desperate attempts to save face, but I was done playing defense. It was time to build something better. Wednesday arrived with the kind of clarity that comes from holding all the cards. I'd spent the night reviewing my old employment contract, specifically Section 12.3, the intellectual property clause everyone signs but nobody reads. The language was beautifully clear. Employees shall have 90 days post-termination to transfer any personal intellectual property integrated into company systems. 90 days, not negotiable, not optional, binding. My report for the Bureau was already complete, but I had one more document to prepare. At 7:15 a.m., I drafted a formal notice to Horizon Vine Technologies, CCing their legal department and board of directors. Intellectual property license expiration. Critical system components. This letter serves as formal notification that personal intellectual property licenses integrated into Horizon Vine systems expired on day 91 following my termination. As per Section 12.3 of my employment agreement, the company had 90 days to negotiate transfer or licensing terms. No such negotiation was initiated. The following components are affected. Warren Authentication Framework, WAF. Distributed Load Balancing Algorithm, DLBA. Secure Token Management System, STMS. 11 additional proprietary modules, full list attached. Continued use of these components without proper licensing constitutes intellectual property violation. Immediate cessation of use is required to avoid legal liability. Emily Warren, CEO. Latitude Systems, LLC. I sent it at exactly 9 a.m., then poured myself coffee and waited. The response came faster than expected. 43 minutes later, my phone rang. Rebecca from HR, though she now introduced herself as Senior Vice President of Human Capital. Emily, we received your letter. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Which part is unclear? Rebecca, you developed these components while employed by Horizon Vine. They belong to the company. Actually, if you check the Git history I've attached, you'll see initial commits for all components predate my employment by 6 to 18 months. I brought existing tools to the project, as documented in my hiring negotiations. Silence, papers shuffling, probably lawyers whispering in the background. We'd like to resolve this amicably, she finally said. What are your terms? Licensing fee of $2 million per year, retroactive to the expiration date, or a one-time transfer fee of $15 million. That's extortion. That's market rate for technology that powers a $60 million system. I've included 3 independent valuations from IP specialists. We'll need to discuss this internally. Of course, you have until 5 p.m. Friday. After that, I'll need to pursue other options to protect my intellectual property. The other options were deliberately vague. Let their lawyers' imaginations run wild. By noon, the tech blogs had picked up the story. Horizon Vine faces IP crisis as former employee claims ownership of core systems. The narrative was shifting from incompetence to something worse, corporate theft. Michael Reeves called at 2:30 p.m. Emily, I just got off a very interesting call with Horizon Vine's CEO. He seems to be under the impression that you're blackmailing them. I'm protecting my intellectual property rights. Everything is documented and above board. Oh, I know. I've had my legal team review everything you sent. It's airtight. I'm actually calling about something else. We're officially terminating Horizon Vine's contract as of Monday. Would Latitude Systems be interested in an emergency sole source contract to build a replacement system? My hand tightened on the phone. We'd be very interested. Excellent. Fair warning, it's a tight timeline. 3 months to minimum viable product. 6 months to full deployment. Budget is $40 million, but we need guaranteed delivery. $40 million. Less than Horizon Vine's contract, but pure profit for a company of one. Send me the requirements. I'll have a proposal by Friday. Already sent. Emily, off the record, your authentication framework is exactly what we need. I assume you'd be willing to license it to the Bureau directly. For the right terms, absolutely. Thursday was a blur of activity. While Horizon Vine's lawyers bombarded me with increasingly desperate offers, $3 million, $5 million, $7 million, I focused on building my proposal for the Bureau. Clean architecture, realistic timelines, and most importantly, full ownership of all code with no ambiguous licensing. The beauty was in the simplicity. I already had the core components. I knew exactly what the Bureau needed, and I could deliver it in half the time with 1/10 of the drama. By Thursday evening, Horizon Vine had reached their final offer, $10 million for full transfer of the IP, still $5 million short of my asking price, but they were running out of time and options. I sent a single-line response, $15 million, non-negotiable. Friday morning brought capitulation, a wire transfer for $15 million, along with contracts formally transferring all intellectual property rights. I signed them at 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the deadline. But the best part came at 4 p.m., when Michael Reeves called with the Bureau's decision. Congratulations, Emily, Latitude Systems has been awarded the contract, $40 million, with performance bonuses for early delivery. Can you start Monday? Absolutely. One more thing. Horizon Vine is threatening to sue, claiming you orchestrated this whole situation. My response was that they should have read their own contracts. Welcome to the world of federal contracting. I hung up and looked around my home office. In 3 months, I'd gone from fired engineer to CEO of a federal contractor with a $40 million project, all because Horizon Vine thought hours mattered more than results. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Heard about the Bureau contract. Are you hiring? I thought about all the talented developers still trapped in Horizon Vine's collapsing ecosystem, still measuring their worth in hours logged instead of problems solved. Send me your resume, I replied. Latitude Systems values work-life balance. The irony wasn't lost on me. Horizon Vine had fired me for working 40 hours a week, Now I'd be earning more in a month than they'd paid me in a year. Still working 40 hours a week. But this time, they'd be my 40 hours. And that made all the difference. The news broke Monday morning like a beautiful symphony of schadenfreude. Horizon Vine Technologies loses federal contract. Stock plummets 73%. The financial press was brutal. From $60 million contract to corporate collapse, a case study in mismanagement. The tech blogs were worse. How Horizon Vine fired their way to bankruptcy. I read the articles over my morning coffee. Now taken in my new office, a bright corner suite in the financial district, with windows overlooking the city and, coincidentally, Horizon Vine's building 6 blocks away. Latitude Systems had grown from a company of 1 to a team of 12 in just a week, all hand-picked from my network of talented developers who understood that productivity meant results, not hours. My phone had been silent all weekend. No more desperate calls from Darren or Rebecca. The $15 million payment had cleared. The contracts were signed, and Horizon Vine had bigger problems than me, like explaining to their investors how they'd lost their primary revenue source. Sarah was my third hire, brought on as lead developer. She'd submitted her resignation to Horizon Vine the same day the Bureau announced their contract termination. "You should see it over there," she said, settling into her new desk. Complete chaos. Darren's been escorted out by security. Apparently, he tried to blame everyone except himself at the board meeting. They found out he'd been inflating his progress reports for months. Escorted out. I tried not to sound too pleased. Friday afternoon. Security packed his office while he stood there, the same way they did to you. Actually, poetic justice. The board brought in a crisis management firm, but half the engineering team has already left. Brad's still there. Promoted himself to CTO on LinkedIn, though I don't think that's official. Brad is CTO. The man who once asked me why we couldn't just copy and paste our way to scalability. Horizon Vine's death spiral was accelerating. Tuesday brought more refugees from the Horizon Vine disaster. Marcus, their best back-end developer, joined as senior architect. Lisa from DevOps came on as infrastructure lead. Each brought stories of 16-hour days, impossible deadlines, and Darren's management by surveillance. He had us install tracking software on our machines, Marcus revealed during our team lunch. Measured keystrokes, mouse movements, even tracked bathroom breaks, said it was for productivity optimization. How did that work out? I asked. Everyone learned to write scripts that simulated activity. We spent more time faking work than doing work. By Wednesday, Latitude Systems had a full team and a clear path forward. We established core hours 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. when everyone needed to be available for collaboration. Outside those hours, work when you work best. No tracking, no surveillance, just trust and results. The Bureau was thrilled with our progress. In 3 days, we'd accomplished more than Horizon Vine had in 3 weeks of crisis mode. Michael stopped by personally to review our architecture plans. "This is exactly what we wanted from the beginning," he said, examining the clean, modular design. "Why couldn't Horizon Vine deliver this?" "They were too busy watching the clock to watch the code," I replied. Thursday's news cycle brought the inevitable. Horizon Vine Technologies files for Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection. They'd lasted exactly 1 week after losing the Bureau contract. Turns out, when 70% of your revenue disappears overnight, so does your business. The bankruptcy filing revealed delicious details. Darren Cole had been receiving a $300,000 salary plus bonuses tied to hours logged by his team. The more overtime he could squeeze out, the more he earned. He'd literally been incentivized to burn out his workforce. Rebecca called that afternoon. Not from Horizon Vine, that number was already disconnected, but from her personal cell. "Emily, I owe you an apology," she began. "I knew what they were doing was wrong, the way they treated you, the culture Darren created. I should have spoken up." "Why didn't you?" "I needed the job, same as everyone. But I wanted you to know the bankruptcy trustee is investigating whether there was deliberate mismanagement. Your documentation about the IP licenses started an audit. Darren might be facing criminal charges for fraud."
I hope you land somewhere better, Rebecca.
Actually, I was wondering if Latitude Systems needs an HR consultant, I promise. No tracking employee hours. I almost laughed. Send me your resume. We judge people on results here. Friday marked the end of my first week as CEO of a federal contractor. We'd made more progress in 5 days than I'd seen in months at Horizon Vine. The team was energized, the client was happy, and everyone left by 5:30 p.m. The local news ran a segment on Horizon Vine's collapse. They interviewed former employees outside the locked building, their access badges now useless. Most expressed shock, confusion, anger. Then they interviewed a business expert who blamed the failure on everything except the real cause, treating humans like machines and measuring worth by presence instead of product. I turned off the TV and looked around our office. Developers collaborating without fear, solving problems without artificial urgency, building something real without the performance theater. This was what work should be. My assistant knocked and entered. "Emily, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from Horizon Vine's board of directors." An older man in an expensive suit entered, looking exhausted. "Ms. Warren, I'm James Chen, former chairman of Horizon Vine's board. I wanted to apologize personally." Former chairman. As of an hour ago, the company is being liquidated. Investors lost everything. I wanted you to know that we've discovered Darren Cole was falsifying reports for months, hiding problems, manipulating metrics. If we'd known, you could have asked the engineers. You could have looked beyond the timesheets. He nodded slowly. "You're right. We got seduced by the optics, everyone working so hard, logging so many hours. We thought that meant dedication. We never asked if it meant results." "What will you do now?" "Retire, probably. Learn from this disaster. Maybe write a book about the dangers of measuring the wrong things." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, they were wrong to fire you. You built something incredible." "Yes," I said. "I did, and now I'm building something better." He left, and I returned to my team. We had a system to deliver, a contract to fulfill, and a company culture to nurture, one that valued humans over hours, results over theater, and recognized that sometimes the best employees are the ones who clock out at 5 because they've already delivered excellence. Horizon Vine was dead. Long live Latitude Systems. The Federal Advisory Board conference room had the kind of austere elegance that whispered power: mahogany table, leather chairs, and a view of the Capitol dome that reminded everyone exactly whose money we were managing. 6 months had passed since Horizon Vine's spectacular collapse, and today marked the final presentation for Phase 1 of the Bureau's new system. I stood at the head of the table, my team of 15 seated along one side. Across from us, Michael Reeves and 8 other federal executives waited expectantly. At the far end of the table, 3 observers from competing contractors sat in silence, including 2 shell-shocked representatives from what remained of Horizon Vine, now reduced to a skeleton crew trying to salvage consulting contracts. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "Latitude Systems is pleased to present the completed Phase 1 deployment of the Secure Federal Data Exchange platform. The demo was flawless. Every module performed exactly as specified. Response times averaged 12 milliseconds. Uptime for the beta period, 99.99%. 0 security breaches. 0 critical failures. 0 missed deadlines. Most remarkably," I continued, "this was achieved with an average team work week of 42 hours, no mandatory overtime, no weekend emergencies, no burnout-driven turnover." One of the executives leaned forward. "How is that possible? Our previous vendor had their team working around the clock and couldn't deliver half this functionality." Sarah stood up. "Because we focused on writing good code once, not bad code repeatedly. When you're not exhausted, you don't make mistakes that require 16-hour days to fix." Marcus added, "We automated everything that could be automated. The time Horizon Vine spent on manual processes and performance theater, we spent on actual engineering." Michael Reeves smiled. "The numbers speak for themselves. Phase 1 delivered 2 weeks early and 14% under budget. The security audit came back perfect, every single requirement met or exceeded. He turned to the Horizon Vine observers. Perhaps you could learn something from this approach. The older of the two, someone I didn't recognize, cleared his throat. We've actually implemented significant cultural changes based on recent lessons learned.
I almost felt sorry for them, almost.
Based on this success, Michael continued, the Bureau is exercising our option for Phase 2. Additionally, we're recommending latitude systems for 3 other federal contracts currently in the pipeline. The room erupted in congratulations. My team, my brilliant, well-rested, highly productive team had just secured our future for the next 5 years. As everyone filed out, the Horizon Vine observers approached me.
Ms. Warren, the younger one said quietly, I'm Brad Thompson. I owe you an apology. I was promoted beyond my competence and too arrogant to admit it. Your architecture was brilliant. I just wasn't skilled enough to understand it.
Character growth from Brad. Wonders never ceased.
We all make mistakes, I said. The key is learning from them.
I'm back to senior developer, where I belong, and we've instituted actual work-life balance policies. No more tracking hours, just deliverables.
Good luck, Brad.
As they left, Michael lingered. You know what the best part of this whole story is?
What's that?
Darren Cole applied for a position here last month, listed his Horizon Vine experience as transformational leadership in high-performance environments. My team Googled him, found the bankruptcy filing, and his application went straight to the shred pile. I couldn't suppress a smile. Karma has a way of balancing the books. Indeed it does. See you at the Phase 2 kickoff Monday, 9 a.m. sharp.
Actually, I said, could we make it 10?
My team likes to ease into Monday mornings, better decisions on proper coffee. 10 it is, your house, your rules. That evening, Latitude Systems held our first anniversary celebration, not in some sterile hotel ballroom, but in the park near our office, with families invited and kids running around. Work-life balance wasn't just a policy, it was who we were. As the sun set over the city, I thought about that Friday morning when Darren had called 40 hours a week the bare minimum. He'd been wrong about so many things, but especially that. 40 hours of focused, intelligent work by talented people wasn't the minimum, it was exactly right. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Another article about our success, with the inevitable comparison to Horizon Vine's failure. The headline read, How One Developer's Revenge Became a Revolution in Workplace Culture. Revenge. They always called it revenge. But it wasn't about revenge, it was about proving a point. That treating people like humans produces better results than treating them like machines. That quality beats quantity. That a rested mind writes better code than an exhausted one. I closed LinkedIn and looked around at my team, laughing and sharing stories as their kids played tag between the picnic tables. This wasn't revenge. This was victory. The real revenge was living well, working reasonable hours, and building something amazing with people who understood that life was more than log entries on a timesheet. The real revenge was proving that everything corporate America believed about hustle culture and grinding was not just wrong, but actively destructive. As the party wound down and families headed home for bedtime stories and evening routines, Sarah approached with a gift from the team, a custom clock that only showed hours from 9 to 5. For the CEO who reminded us that time isn't just money, she said, it's life. I hung it in my office the next morning, right where everyone could see it, a monument to the radical idea that had brought down a $60 million company and built a better one in its place. Sometimes, 40 hours is exactly enough.
Welcome home, indeed.
Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice and workplace revenge, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. What did you think about Emily's journey? Have you ever experienced a toxic workplace culture that measured hours over results? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time. Remember, your worth isn't measured by the hours on your timesheet, but by the value you create. See you in the next story.